2 Hellcats against 60. David MacCampbell's impossible morning over the Philippine Sea. October 24, 1944. The Philippine Sea. 0950 hours. The squawk box crackled in the Essex ready room. All available fighter pilots, man your planes. The radar in the Combat Information Center above showed 3 overlapping contacts bearing northwest. 60-plus Japanese aircraft. Distance 40 miles. Altitude stacked from 1,000 feet to 25,000. The contacts were moving fast and they were not turning. Commander David MacCampbell heard the announcement and stood. His Hellcat sat half-fueled on the flight deck catapult. 21 small Japanese flags lined the fuselage below the cockpit, one for each confirmed kill recorded since May. The deck crew had interrupted fueling that morning to reposition the aircraft. There was no time to resume it now. A second announcement came immediately after the first. All except the air group commander. He is not to go. MacCampbell stopped. Rear Admiral Frederick Sherman had forbidden him from flying offensive missions. MacCampbell commanded Air Group 15, the entire air arm of USS Essex. He was too valuable to risk. His tactical authority, his accumulated experience, his institutional knowledge of the group's capabilities, losing any of it was a cost the Navy could not accept. Sherman had said it directly and recently. MacCampbell stood at the ready room hatch and thought for 4 seconds. A third announcement followed. Now hear this. Air Group Commander is to fly. Affirmative. Air Group Commander is to fly. He was already moving. On the flight deck, the deck crew pushed his aircraft into launch position. The fuel tanks sat below capacity. There was no time to correct this. Beside him, Ensign Roy Rushing climbed into the second available Hellcat. The rest of Air Group 15 had launched hours earlier on a strike against the Japanese fleet spotted in the inland sea. These 2 aircraft were what remained. 2 Hellcats. 60 contacts. An invasion fleet behind them carrying 200,000 American soldiers on Philippine beaches that needed every supply ship still floating. The catapult fired. MacCampbell was airborne. What followed in the next 90 minutes would never be equaled by any American naval aviator in any war. The Pacific War in October 1944 had reached a reckoning that both sides understood with precision. 3 years of American industrial production had reversed every calculation Japan made in December 1941. The strikes on Pearl Harbor were planned on the assumption that American public opinion would fracture under defeat, that the United States would negotiate rather than rebuild. That assumption collapsed within months. American shipyards launched escort carriers in under 3 weeks. American factories produced more aircraft in 1943 than Japan produced in the entire war. The F6F Hellcat outperformed the Japanese Zero in every category above 12,000 feet. Japan had nothing in production to replace it with. By mid-1944, the structural collapse of Japanese naval aviation had reached the point of no recovery. The Battle of the Philippine Sea in June, Americans called it the Great Turkey Shoot, destroyed 373 Japanese aircraft in 2 days. The pilots who died in that engagement had trained for years. They understood formation tactics, deflection shooting, altitude management, and mutual defense. Their replacements arrived at units with fewer than 500 hours of flight time, in some cases fewer than 200. They died faster than the training pipeline could produce new men. Japan's answer to this structural weakness was Shogo, Operation Victory. The plan committed virtually the entire remaining Japanese fleet to a single decisive engagement around the Philippines. MacArthur's landings at Leyte on October 20th provided the trigger point. Lose the Philippines, and the oil supply lines from the Dutch East Indies were cut permanently. Without oil, Japan's fleet ceased to function within months. The Japanese admiral led center force directly toward Leyte Gulf through the inland sea. 5 battleships, 12 cruisers, 15 destroyers. Among the battleships were 2 of the largest warships ever built, each displacing 64,000 tons, each armed with 9 18-inch guns, the largest naval rifles ever fitted to a warship. Their destination was the American invasion anchorage at Leyte, where transport ships, supply vessels, and 200,000 tons of equipment supported MacArthur's army on the beach. The Japanese 2nd Air Fleet on Luzon provided air cover for this operation. On the morning of October 24th, coordinated land-based strikes launched in 3 waves against the American fast carrier task forces positioned east of the Philippines. These were experienced pilots by late-war Japanese standards, not the instructors lost at the Philippine Sea battle, but the best Japan had remaining. The 60 aircraft MacCampbell's radar tracked that morning represented one wave of this coordinated assault. Their heading placed the invasion fleet 11 minutes behind them. MacCampbell knew none of this geometry at launch. He climbed northwest with Rushing off his wing and made one decision in the first 5 minutes. He radioed Essex Combat Information Center. "My wingman and I are up here alone with about 40 fighters. What do you suggest that we do, attack them or not?" In the Combat Information Center below, the fighter direction officer processed the question. Lieutenant John, later governor of Texas, later wounded in the automobile carrying President Kennedy through Dallas, looked at his radar scope and gave the most honest answer the situation permitted. "Well, use your best judgment." MacCampbell acknowledged and turned toward the contacts. His background made that decision different from what it would have been for most pilots. David MacCampbell was born in Bessemer, Alabama, in January 1910. He grew up in West Palm Beach, Florida. He was not a romantic fighter pilot, not a teenager who built model planes and dreamed of dogfights. He was an athlete and an engineer. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1933 as a champion swimmer and diver with a degree in marine engineering. He chose naval aviation in 1937 at age 27, older than most flight students by 4 years. He spent the first years of the Pacific War as a landing signal officer aboard Wasp, the man who stood on the carrier's fantail with paddles and guided other pilots to safe landings. He was an expert at reading aircraft behavior from the outside. When Wasp went down in September 1942, sunk by a Japanese submarine, he returned to the United States and spent 18 months forming and training Air Group 15. He entered aerial combat for the first time in May 1944. He was 34 years old. At the Turkey Shoot in June, he shot down 7 Japanese aircraft in a single engagement and became an ace in one day. By October 24th, his score stood at 25 confirmed victories. His methods were precise to the point of being mechanical. He fired at convergence range. He never wasted ammunition on maneuvering targets. He selected one aircraft, committed to the approach, fired a controlled burst, disengaged before the enemy could respond. An engineer's system applied to a gunfighter's problem. His aircraft climbed northwest. Rushing held formation. Ahead, the contacts resolved into a visible mass, bombers in the center, 0 fighters stacked around the perimeter, the formation tight and purposeful. MacCampbell counted, 60 minimum, possibly more. He checked his fuel gauge, already below what a full tank would show. He pushed the throttle forward. The Japanese formation materialized at 15,000 feet, a dense column stretched across 2 miles of Philippine sky. Japanese 0 fighters flew loose patrol on the outer edges. At the center, Japanese dive bombers and torpedo aircraft held their course east. The formation had not yet registered 2 Hellcats climbing toward them from below and behind. MacCampbell made his first calculation in 15 seconds. The formation's rear element had lost spacing with the main body. 800 yards of open air separated the trailing 0 pickets from the bulk of the escort ahead of them. 800 yards was an approach corridor. He keyed the radio, told Rushing the plan in 4 words, rolled the Hellcat into a diving pass from altitude, building speed, aligning on the rearmost 0 in the column. The Whitney R-2800 in the Hellcat produced 2,000 horsepower. In a diving attack from altitude, the Hellcat reached speeds the 0's engine could not match in pursuit. MacCampbell came down from behind and above, fired a 2-second burst from 650 caliber machine guns, and pulled away before the Japanese formation could vector a response. The rearmost 0 trailed black smoke for 3 seconds, then it fell. He climbed, reset, rolled into the second pass. The Japanese rear escort reacted to the first kill with confusion rather than coordination. 1-0 broke right. The nearest 0 broke left. Neither broke upward, the direction MacCampbell was already heading. The gap between their responses created a second corridor through the escort layer. He came back down through it and destroyed a second aircraft before the escort leader transmitted his first warning to the formation. Rushing attacked from the opposite flank, preventing the Japanese from forming a coordinated defensive turn. 2 Hellcats attacking from opposite sides forced the escort into a choice no formation drill had adequately addressed. Turn to face one attacker and expose your rear to the other. Climb and abandon the bombers. Hold formation and absorb losses. The escort leader held formation, the correct response against multiple numerically superior attackers, and the worst possible response against 2. Inside the Japanese command structure in those first 10 minutes, the picture forming at Clark Field on Luzon was logically constructed and completely wrong. The escort leader's radio described 2 American fighters attacking from the rear. The command post processed this against doctrine. American Combat Air Patrol operated in divisions of 4 to 8 aircraft. 2 fighters did not willingly attack 60. The 2 visible fighters were the advance element of a larger intercept force positioning from altitude behind the formation. The command post reinforced the escort layer from behind. This stripped coverage from the flanks. MacCampbell recognized the opening in 7 seconds and drove through it into the bomber formation itself. He marked each kill in pencil on his dashboard. The pencil sat in the map pocket beside his knee. After each pass he climbed, noted the number, made his calculations, and rolled back in. A dive bomber fell at the 3rd mark, a second at the 4th. He fired only when geometry aligned precisely, target stable, range inside 400 yards, Hellcat tracking steady. Each burst consumed 40 to 60 rounds from a total supply of 2,400. The arithmetic permitted no waste. He had been one of the Navy's top 3 gunnery competition scorers in 1940. Those years of clay pigeon shooting behind his house in Alabama, ducks mostly, the angles fast and unforgiving, had built the same mechanical patience. "I just kept on shooting," he said afterward. At the 5th kill, the Japanese formation began losing cohesion. Bomber crews watched the escort thin around them and initiated defensive weaving. Small lateral movements meant to spoil a pursuer's aim. Defensive weaving slowed their forward progress. Ground speed dropped from 220 miles per hour toward 200. Every additional minute MacCampbell extended the engagement gave the fleet below additional time, anti-aircraft crews to tracking positions, additional Hellcats scrambling from other carriers, radar operators refining approach vectors. The escort leader's messages to Clark Field grew more urgent and more fragmented. 0 pilots in different sectors reported 3 attackers, then 4, then a group approaching from above. MacCampbell and Rushing moved between passes fast enough that different Japanese pilots were reporting the same 2 Hellcats from different angles as different aircraft. The command post at Clark Field, integrating these reports, estimated the intercept force at 6 to 8 American fighters minimum. They redirected land-based reserves to provide additional cover. Those reserves were no longer in position to reinforce the strike. 2 Hellcats had become a phantom squadron in the Japanese reporting chain. At approximately the 40-minute mark, the escort leader redirected his remaining fighters into a defensive cluster around the bomber formation, standard doctrine for protecting bombers against a numerically superior pursuer. Against 2 aircraft attacking from altitude, this compressed the Japanese into a predictable orbit. MacCampbell worked the rear of the cluster. Kill 6, kill 7. Each pass lasted under 8 seconds from the firing run to the exit. Each recovery took him above 20,000 feet where the Zero's engine lost power and the Hellcats did not. The formation fragmented. 60 coordinated aircraft became 40-plus individuals scattered across 10 miles of sky at varying altitudes, with no mutual support and no coherent vector toward the fleet. Some turned back toward Luzon. Others pressed forward independently. The torpedo planes, stripped of escort and facing radar-directed anti-aircraft fire from the fleet's outer screen, broke off without releasing ordnance. Not one aircraft from this strike formation reached the American fleet. Rushing's voice came over the radio, fuel critical. MacCampbell checked his own gauge. 2 passes remained in his fuel margin. He made them. Kill 8 and Kill 9 fell within 4 minutes of each other, both zeros that had climbed to meet him and found the Hellcat already above them when they arrived. He turned east. The pencil marks on his dashboard numbered 9. His hands were steady. The Philippine Sea spread flat and gray below the wings, and somewhere behind him the invasion fleet sat intact. The fuel held for 40 miles toward Essex. The carrier's flight deck was crowded with aircraft returning from the morning strike, no room for an emergency recovery. MacCampbell declared fuel emergency and diverted to USS Langley. He crossed her fantail with altitude his instruments measured at under 50 feet above the deck edge. The wire caught. The Hellcat stopped. He sat in the cockpit for 30 seconds before climbing out. The deck crew checked the ammunition bays and found 2 rounds remaining across all 6 guns. The engine, when they drained the fuel system, held enough fuel to run approximately 10 more minutes. 2 rounds, 10 minutes, 9 marks on a dashboard. The mathematics of that morning would take historians decades to fully account for. In the debriefing room aboard Langley, he described each kill precisely. Aircraft type, altitude, heading, observed result, rounds expended. The intelligence officers cross-referenced every statement against Rushing's independent account given simultaneously aboard Essex. Every kill confirmed. The total raised MacCampbell's career score to 34 confirmed aerial victories. No American naval aviator in history had reached that number. No American naval aviator in any subsequent war would come close. The ready room that evening was loud with the day's events. Another pilot mentioned shooting down 5 aircraft that morning and asked MacCampbell his number. The room went quiet when he answered. He ate dinner later at a corner table, alone with a plate he left mostly untouched. The battle outside was still ongoing. The fleet commander's surface force was reversing course in the inland sea. The southern Japanese forces were moving into the southern strait. The American carrier fleet was chasing a decoy force north. The 4-day Battle of Leyte Gulf would become the largest naval engagement in history. MacCampbell had been inside it for 90 minutes that morning and then returned to a carrier. He said afterward, in one of the few personal statements he made in the years following the war, "I brag about the planes I shot down, but I don't brag about the number of people I killed." He slept in his bunk that night. The war had 9 months left. The October 24th engagement entered American naval history with unusual speed and unusual neglect at the same time. The speed. MacCampbell's 9 kills were, and placed in official Navy records within 48 hours. His career total of 34 confirmed victories gave the United States Navy an ace of aces, whose margin over all other naval aviators has never been closed in 80 years. The Medal of Honor citation approved through the chain of command described his actions in language that official military documents rarely used. Fighting desperately but with superb skill against such overwhelming, he shot down 9 Japanese planes and, completely disorganizing the enemy group, forced the remainder to abandon the attack before a single aircraft could reach the fleet. The neglect came from context. Army Air Force aces Richard Bong and Tommy accumulated 40 and 38 aerial victories respectively and received sustained press coverage through the war's final year. They were Army. The Army's public affairs apparatus understood newspaper deadlines and radio programs. The Navy's top ace received 3 weeks of column space in early 1945, then competed with the Pacific Island battles, Dresden, and the march across Germany for the front page. He lost that competition without entering it. MacCampbell returned to the United States at the war's end, received his Medal of Honor through the naval chain of command rather than a White House ceremony. His health had deteriorated too far for the planned presentation, and continued his naval career through Korean War-era assignments. He retired in 1964 at the rank of captain. He settled in Florida, gave occasional lectures, answered historians' correspondence, and avoided the performance of heroism that some veterans built careers from. He died in June 1996 at age 86 in a nursing home in Beach, Florida. Japanese post-war analysis of the Leyte Gulf air campaign, compiled through interrogations of surviving naval officers during American occupation, and published in the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, reached specific conclusions about the October 24th strikes. The survey documented that Japan's Second Air Fleet on Luzon committed experienced crews in its coordinated strikes that morning, men who represented a significant percentage of Japan's remaining trained naval aviators. Their loss that day compounded the structural manpower crisis already acute since the June battles. Japanese naval officers described the October 24th air losses as an acceleration point in the exhaustion of experienced personnel, irreplaceable men, at any production rate. The invasion fleet survived October 24th intact. Supply lines to Leyte held open. MacArthur's 200,000 soldiers continued receiving food, ammunition, and reinforcement on the schedule the campaign required. The land campaign succeeded. The Philippines fell to American forces over the following months. The oil supply lines Japan had staked the entire Shogo operation on protecting were severed anyway, by air, by submarine, by the collapse of Japanese surface power at Leyte Gulf itself. MacCampbell's 90 minutes did not win the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The battle was too large and too complex for any single action to determine it alone. What the engagement produced was a specific, measurable intervention at a specific moment. 60 aircraft aimed at the American carrier force were turned back without reaching their targets. The carriers that survived October 24th continued operating against the Japanese Admiral Surface Force, against the decoy carrier force to the north, and against Japanese positions throughout the Philippines for the remainder of the campaign. The tactical principle his engagement demonstrated entered American carrier aviation doctrine within 6 months. 2 or 3 highly experienced aircraft using altitude advantage, precision fire, and relentless attack tempo could disrupt a numerically superior formation's command coherence disproportionate to their numbers, provided they prioritized disruption over individual kills and maintained fuel and ammunition discipline throughout. This principle appears in American naval aviation curriculum today, not as biography, as geometry. The National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida carries his name. Student naval aviators at Pensacola train in facilities adjacent to where his record is recorded. Most pass his name on the wall without stopping. His radio call at the opening of the engagement has the quality of a man performing arithmetic rather than preparing for glory. 60 aircraft on the radar, 2 Hellcats ready, the fleet behind him. He asked a reasonable question and got the only reasonable answer available. He had been told specifically not to fly that morning. He flew anyway. He climbed towards 60 contacts on a half-full tank of fuel. He fired until 2 rounds remained in the belts. He landed on the wrong carrier because his own had no room for 1 more aircraft. The record has stood for 80 years. The name is on a wall in Pensacola. Stop, read it. Then consider what it cost him to earn it and that he asked for advice first, and that the best advice anyone could give him that morning was 3 words. Use your judgment. He did.